You're listening to the summary of the interview. For a link to the full-length episode, please check the description below.
Welcome to another episode of Investing in Regenerative Agriculture, Investing as if the Planet Mattered, a podcast show where I talk to the pioneers in the regenerative food and agriculture space to learn more on how to put our money to work to regenerate soil, people, local communities and ecosystems while making an appropriate and fair return. Why my focus on soil and regeneration? Because so many of the pressing issues we face today have their roots in how we treat our land, grow our food and what we eat. And it's time that we as investors, big and small, and consumers start paying much more attention to the dirt/soil underneath our feet. Before we get started, I've been recording these interviews next to my day job, and I will definitely continue to do so and release about an episode a month. But at the same time, I would love to take this further, share more interviews. There are many more stories to share on investing in regenerative food and agriculture. More depth, improve the quality, maybe even doing some video series. So I started a Patreon community, which makes it easy to support creators like myself. If these podcasts have been of value to you, and if you have the means, I invite you to support me and make this happen. For more information, please find the link to my Patreon account in the description below. And now, without further ado, the interview. Enjoy! I'm here today with Paul McMahon, co-founder and managing partner of SLM Partners, an asset manager that acquires and manages rural land on behalf of institutional investors to scale up regenerative ecological farming and forestry systems. He's also the writer of a white paper called The Investment Case for Ecological Farming.
I think we see land at the center of a number of overlapping and increasingly important environmental issues. For example, climate change. Land is going to play a huge role as a carbon sink as we try and get greenhouse gas emissions, out of the atmosphere, and whether that's in soils, whether it's in trees or biomass on the land. But terrestrial carbon, we think, has got a huge future of the next, 50 to 100 years. We think those systems are proven at a small scale, and there's some fantastic case studies out there. And I'll note, often driven just by innovative farmers, not necessarily coming out of academia or the research institutes, but by really innovative farmers trying out new ideas and sort of creating things from the ground up. And so they're proven at a small scale, but they need to be scaled up. And that's where we think investment capital can play a role. I think there's two things changing at the moment. What we're seeing is that those, let's say, what were previously externalities, which people got away with for free, are increasingly being priced and regulated. And so actually farmers, land managers are being forced by policy and regulation to actually take into account the impacts they're having on carbon, on water, on soils, and biodiversity. I think a second, and maybe even a more powerful driver, a more immediate driver, is shifting consumer demands and consumer trends. Farming is the ultimate biological business. It's the fundamental business of farming is taking sunlight, energy, combining with water and the properties and minerals of the soils, to grow things. Organic cropping systems, which are able to outproduce in terms of yield, actually, conventional cropping systems, during droughts. There's been a number of case studies in 2012 in the US where that was the case with corn production. There's also diversity. I think you find that those more ecological farms tend to be growing a broader mix of crops or raising a broader mix of animals. So you're getting some resilience just from diversity, which really reflects and mimics nature. We founded SLM Partners in 2009, and our vision is building an asset management firm wholly focused on sustainable regenerative agriculture and forestry. So we take a real assets approach. So we're in most cases looking to acquire land or invest in land as a primary asset, and then look to really accelerate a shift in management, from let's say more conventional unsustainable practices to more sustainable regenerative practices. What we've done so far, we've raised an Australian beef cattle fund in 2012. We have about 100 million Australian dollars in equity and debt in that structure in Australia. We're raising an Irish forestry fund at the moment. The idea there is we're looking to acquire existing mid-rotation commercial forests in Ireland. We want to transform where possible to a more sustainable type of forest management called continuous cover forestry, where you never clear the forest, you maintain forest cover, you selectively harvest, you get a more natural, diverse forest. I mean, that's the other key thing. There's lots of people running around, former bankers with presentations and spreadsheets, and that's kind of easy to do. But the hard part is actually making it happen on the ground, and for that you need great technical people, great operational managers, or people who've got dirt on the fingernails and really have done this before. A huge amount of education has to be done just to get people comfortable with the dynamic of the sector. But actually, the third thing that's happening in the investment side is, if you look at where money flowed into agriculture over the last 5 to 10 years, it mostly went into quite passive buy and lease strategies. But that's started to run out of steam now because land prices are actually coming down, they're correcting, cash rents are coming down. It's a pretty tough time actually in conventional agriculture to make any money. And at the same time, you look what's happening in the organic space in these more, let's say, consumer-friendly markets. That's where all the growth is, and that's where premiums are available. That's where people are still making good money.
What for you is the number one overlooked risk there?
Well, I think it depends on your time frame. I think if you look over a very long time frame, I think the degradation of natural assets, in particular soil degradation, I think it's a huge issue for kind of humankind over the next century. It's one of these slow run problems that you can ignore, especially if you're in a very fertile area with very deep topsoils. But eventually it will come back to bite you. I think though in the immediate term, the bigger risk of the more conventional systems is the changing consumer. The consumer, whether you agree or disagree, wants something different from what conventional ag is selling.
What are the two most important barriers you see for the sector to reach its potential?
So I think that's probably the biggest challenge still, just be able to show evidence and data that this can be done at a scale. I think the second is just a more general one for the sector, in that just agriculture of any type is still unfamiliar territory for most investors. It tends to be capital intensive. The returns are lower. You're not going to get your VC private equity 20-25% net IRRs. It's just not possible. But at the same time, you have a lot of downside protection because you have real assets, you have land, you have biological assets.
When you look at the barrier of scaling the few pioneers or the pioneers with a few hundred or few thousand hectares to a fund like SLM, like you're managing now, how did you overcome that barrier to investors?
We took investors to farms in Australia using exactly the same ideas, having done it with great success. And so they could sort of see with their own eyes, this has been done on, let's say, 10,000, 20,000 acres. Well, there's no reason it can't be done on 100,000 or 500,000 acres. If you look at our kind of philosophy is around rural land and harnessing sunlight, water, and soils, to grow things. It's interesting. So financial investors like to think in asset classes, but nature doesn't think that way. The boundaries are fluid and everything's interlinked. So we can see a time in the future where we may even try and combine some agriculture and forestry strategies together.
If you could give advice to smart investors that want to get into the regenerative agriculture space, what would be your number one advice?
Only invest with teams who have real farmers on board. It's too easy to come up and sell a concept, but the farming is actually really hard, and it's actually hard than managing a fund, for example. And so unless you've got people on a team who've actually done this and have made mistakes and have the scars to show it, then I'd be a little bit wary.
You just listened to the summary of the interview. For the full-length interview, please find the link in the description below. If you found the Investing in Regenerative Agriculture and Food podcast valuable, there are a few simple ways you can use to support it. Number 1, rate and review the podcast on your podcast app. That's the best way for other listeners to find the podcast, and it only takes a few seconds. Number 2, share this podcast on social media or email it to your friends and colleagues. Number 3. If this podcast has been of value to you and if you have the means, please join my Patreon community to help grow this platform and allow me to take it further. You can find all the details on patreon.com/regenerativeagriculture or in the description below. Thank you so much and see you at the next podcast.